Okay, welcome back. It is late August 1870. It's been a bit of time since my last video. I've been in bed with flu or COVID or something totally hideous for the last week and a half, and I'm a lot better now. I'm up and about. There may be coughing fits. If there are, I'll put you on pause to complete that. And I actually did a video about as I was coming. I think it was the night that I started feeling ill, actually, and I was, shivering headaches, coughing, sneezing, all that jazz, and thought, let's invade Greece, that'll cheer me up. And I did, but I was like 2 turns into the video. It was only a 20-minute video, and I thought I'm just too ropey to do this, so I kind of left the video and thought I can complete the video at a later date when I'm feeling better. I revisited that video today, and there's no sound. I think that I was in such a disheveled state I didn't even plug my mic jack in, So we actually begin this video a turn in to our first kind of conflict. Well, not our first conflict with a minor power, really, but the first conflict of the decade anyway. I mentioned in the last video that the plan was this year to get start the decade off with a bit of a bang with twin interventions against Greece, which is a very minor power. This is not the Greece even of the 20th century. It's a Greece that comprises really Athens and the Peloponnese, so the prospect of Greece being any kind of banana skin is practically zero, and that seems to have been borne out by the opening moves. Egypt, bit of a different situation, obviously. Egypt, we are committing more substantial forces to Egypt. The war with Egypt has not started yet, so we've begun the intervention against Greece. We're going to be looking at a fairly long-term military occupation, and then hopefully looking to secure territorial claims on Athens. We'll link Athens up with Salonika, with railroads, and begin to develop the region also. But the opening move against Athens has been successful. We'll go into a bit more detail on the reports of the last turn in a moment. We're beginning to bring forces into play for Egypt. So we've got the 5th Army in the Sinai, relocated on rails. We now have enough locomotives, enough rolling stock, enough miles of railroad that we can actually move an entire army of about 90,000 to 100,000 men really within a couple of months, and that would not have been possible 10 years ago. So we relocated this army in pieces, really, sort of an army corps and a few other elements at a time. And that force is down the Sinai. We've constructed an ad hoc force, which is going to it's comprised of a Croat reserve volunteer force, a brigade of cavalry, and a fairly substantial supply train because of the sort of remote character of where this force is going to be fighting. The closest depot and port is Benghazi, and it's going to be in Sulum. It's really going to function. It's under the command of Ahmed Ayoub, and it is an ad hoc force. It's not a completely properly formed army. It's a relatively small force, about, let's have a look, 33,000 men, so it's not a full-sized sort of force. Their main job is really to screen our holdings in Cyrenaica. And what we are going to do is embark a large force for a landing at Alexandria. So we're going to push from the Sinai into Suez. Simultaneously, we're going to land in Alexandria, and then we're going to seize Gazala. So we're going to basically be moving 3 commands, 2 of which are going to be fully fledged armies. The command earmarked for landing in Alex is going to be the 4th Army under Beyazid Pasha, currently in Selenik. We moved the 1st Army down into Athens. We wanted to hold the 4th Army in place at Salonika in case there was a British intervention, for example, from Corfu, and to have a kind of a reserve in the area, really, just in case something went wrong, a European power moved or something like that. So we had a force nearby to support our position in Greece. It looks like that's going to be surplus to requirements. So we're going to give it a couple of months, and then we're going to really make our move against Egypt. We're not going to do it sort of simultaneously as Greece. We'll occupy Greece, and then we'll make a move against Egypt. But I mean, so far so good. Let's have a look at the opening. So we basically last turn, or the turn before, a month ago, so late July, we handed our declaration of war to Greece. We passed turn, and then in early August we marched the 1st Army on an assault posture to take Athens, and this is the opening engagement. This is really the entire Greek field command. Again, it is a very minor power at this point. Interesting unit cards, but it's a 3-round action. They've only got a force of like 38,000 men, It's a very modest force indeed. We chunked them for 10,000 casualties, and the remainder of their force, bear in mind that a lot of that force is actually inside Athens, so is systematically destroyed. In fact, they lose 4, 5, 6, 8 elements altogether, so that's really good stuff. We've taken the capital. Next move, very predictably, is going to be a 5-day march then from Athens to the Peloponnese to secure the remainder of Greece. We've got the fleet, the first fleet sitting off the Peloponnese, really to kind of blockade. What was interesting is the Greek fleet was not based in Athens. The Greek fleet was actually based in, I don't know, Corinth or something like this. So we've kind of sought to try and blockade that fleet in Corinth. We haven't seen anything. There's Egyptian ships, which is interesting. We'll kind of keep that in mind. But anyway, we don't know where the Greek fleet is. It's a very modest fleet at this stage. It's no real threat to us. Of course, the Ottomans are much more of an industrial power than they were, so we could field a much larger force. We've got access to much more war material and this kind of thing. So no, I think there's going to be no real issues with Greece for us. We have kept fairly substantial forces in the northern frontier. Our peace deal with Austria lasts for how many more turns? Let's have a look. There's never a quick way, is there? See, mouse wheel sometimes works, but it doesn't seem to be when I'm using this recording suite. So peace treaty, another 2 or 12 turns. It's quite a bit of time then. But obviously Austria is very manageable for us now, but that's our perception of it. That's not necessarily the case for the Austrians. The Austrians may genuinely think that they're just one significant engagement away from turning it all around, securing Bosnia-Herzegovina and so on and so forth. And even though the Austrians have been hideously defeated by us repeatedly over the last 20 years, we are also mindful of the fact that Franz Joseph's crack pipe is hot to the fucking touch, and it's really likely that he's going to prosecute an aggressive war against us at some point. We could end all of this. Of course we could end all this. We could just give them back the territories that we took and Bosnia-Herzegovina, and that'll probably be it. But what's the point in that? I mean, what's the point, Not least because we are actually able to defend ourselves, and we've hobbled the Austrians. The Austrians are manageable. I think on paper, their paper strength is fairly considerable. So the Austrian AI, if you like, the Austrian chiefs of staff, are always going to calculate that they can move against us. There's some interesting things here, though, that I was thinking about, and it's to do with historical events that haven't triggered. So the Austro-Prussian War of 66 never happened. Therefore, the 68-69 compromise, which is where the Austrian nobility basically cut a deal with the Hungarian and Croat nobility. Once they lose their leadership position in Germany to Prussia, which paves the way for German unification, which is secured this year in the 1870 war with France. Once that happens, Austria has to then, come to terms with the fact that it is a Balkan empire, and the way that it can do that and maintain some kind of sort of political cohesion is to cut a deal with the Hungarian and the Croat nobility to kind of co-opt them into their kind of project, and hence is born the Austro-Hungarian Empire, as opposed to the Austrian Empire. That hasn't happened. The flag hasn't changed. They've still got the Austrian flag. It's still the Austrian Empire. Now that could have, it didn't really, I mean, it only occurred to me today actually, that can have some real ramifications for Austria, because I would imagine that the compromise of 68-69 would lead to some kind of loyalty buff. Like, you'd have thought that, I mean, like, their loyalty is Austrian loyalty is pretty shaky through huge swathes of their territory. In fact, the only areas where Austrian loyalty is firm is rather predictably in the Germanic-speaking areas, and it's a little bit firmer in Bohemia, but that might be subject to change over time. So there's a pretty good chance that the Austrian Empire could actually just dissolve. It might just dissolve under its own weight. Keep in mind that they kept Dalmatia, or Spalato, even after the peace deal, but loyalty there is so unbelievably low. Because of the independence of Croatia, areas that I guess were controlled by Croatia now have a very high level of Croat loyalty, which is really interesting. So Spalato has 50% Croat loyalty. That means that they're going to be facing like unending kind of insurgencies and revolts. This is also the case by the looks of it with Fiume, which we control. I mean, this might bite us in the arse a little bit as well, but we can always occupy Croatia whenever we want to. Also, for example, in and ignore me, I was looking at sort of Crane actually, that's 45% Austrian loyalty, 25% Slovenian, 30% rebels. Excuse me. In any case, there is a significant revolt in Spalato. It's 89% controlled by rebels now. We're actually going to wait for the rebels to militarily completely occupy that area, and then we're going to occupy it ourselves and see if we can't pull off on the Dalmatian coastline what the kind of Prussians did to the Russians in Poland, where they occupied Warsaw. They never went to war with Russia, which is quite interesting. So they just militarily occupy the area. We're going to try and pull that off in Dalmatia. We do have an army in the Third Army under Abdelkarina Dia in Sarajevo, so we have a force that's well placed to do that. We'll give it another sort of fortnight, another month. Once it's 100% controlled by rebels, we're just going to move in a military occupier. And we should have carte blanche to do that, I think. There shouldn't be any kind of legalistic issue with that. And we're just going to keep a force there. We'll move some garrison forces in, we'll fortify the city, we'll just make it ours. And if the Austrians want it back, well, they can try and take it, can't they? And that would increase our position, or develop a position on the Adriatic coastline a little bit more. So that's a bit of a project I've got. And again, in 71, we're probably going to be looking at another war with Austria, or rather a continuation of warfare. Peace is broken out between Austria and Italy. I don't think that was the case in the last video. So the Italians don't control anything else. They still control the Italian peninsula, Sicily and Sardinia. I suspect their army is very weak due to continuous warfare. And the Italians have not fared as well against the Austrians as we have. So they've got a large army to rebuild and very limited means with which to do that, frankly. So we'll keep an eye on the Italian peninsula, but they're no real threat to us for the foreseeable future. There's a good chance the Austrians will periodically occupy large parts of the Italian peninsula just to basically secure reparations, which is, I suppose, is a kind of boost to their tax income. One interesting thing is that the war between one of the catalysts for the Franco-Prussian War is Spanish succession. The Hohenzollerns, I think, were looking to kind of really intentionally antagonize Paris by proposing a Hohenzollern for the Spanish throne, and it worked perfectly. And this was the catalyst, or part of the catalyst, for the Franco-Prussian War, which was really Bismarck setting the French up. He was looking to deliver a quick defeat on France. That would secure Germany. That would be the only other great land power in Europe removed from the equation that can intervene to stop Prussian control of Germany and the de facto formation of Germany. In our parallel universe, what has actually happened is a war between France and Spain. Okay, fine. But bewilderingly, France has not done as well as I imagined it would have against Spain. It's a war that's about 6 months or maybe a year old or something like that. And the Spanish actually control border regions of France. I can't see them holding that long term, but that is a surprise and an embarrassment for France. There is also a revolt in Artois or Arras, which is interesting. It's not looking good for France, is it? Not looking good at all. If Prussia does declare war on France now, if they can't hold their own against Spain, I don't know how the hell they're going to be able to stop Prussia. But incidentally, the Franco-Prussian War in real life began, I think, in June or July, and it's late August, so it may not come to pass. We can take heart from that. If historical events are not firing, that's good for us, because historical events for the Ottomans in the next 20 or 30 years are not going to be good for the most part. They're not going to be favourable. The hope is that the 1877 war with Russia, if it fires, okay, fine, but a scripted end to that war, which does not take into account, the historical trajectory that we're on, would not be desirable. So we'll see what happens anyway. For the next turn, then, we'll just pass through a couple of turns, just to kind of get us back in the saddle. We're just going to move to occupy the Peloponnese, or Patras, and Corinth. We're moving Ahmed Ayub Pasha's force to Sulum to set up the screen. That's a 16-day march. We're probably going to be good to move, I reckon, in late September, probably. The Fifth Army is in place in Sinai, although it is not activated, and that's okay. And do we have the transport fleet already? No, that is a French fleet. Where's the transport fleet? Now that's the reserve surface fleet. Well, I suppose it took Ayub Pasha, so it's going to be here, isn't it? Yeah, there we go. Right, fine. Let's move the transport fleet up to Salonika then. 13 days, okay. We've got a railroad going in. This was actually a scripted railroad, I think. This was a scripted event, which is interesting. The economy's doing well. There's been, in the last sort of 6 months, we've dramatically increased our agricultural production on the basis of mechanization and the application of chemicals and fertilizers to agriculture. And this is kind of being facilitated through a significant industrial expansion, but not the kind of typical industries that we saw at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, which is based on coal and steel and very kind of elementary manufactured goods. Instead, we're looking at an increase in the industrial base that's focused around things like chemicals to basically provide for our expanding agricultural base. So there's a real kind of sort of synergy really between now our industrial economy and our agricultural economy. And also a lot of other raw materials like mining and this kind of thing requires mechanical parts. I've mentioned this before. We continue the process of expanding our agricultural base. All of our tobacco plantations, all of our opium plantations and coffee plantations have been expanded. Now they've been kind of upgraded at some expense, as is the case also with our wineries or vineyards. And we're now focusing on expanding just fruit plantations and this kind of thing. We're just kind of, at this point, yes, we've got fruits in Izmit, keeping an eye on what raw materials it costs us as well. Fisheries are what they are for the time being. I think virtually all of our agricultural enterprises in Europe have kind of been expanded, say for Bucharest. I tell you what, let's begin the construction then of the Bucharest rail line. It's unbelievably cheap. I'm playing a multiplayer game as Russia at the moment, and inflation is at like 14%. I kind of inherited it a little bit from a previous player. That's not to throw shade on that player. He might have been pursuing a very different strategy from the one I am. But and also coupled with that, there's an economic crisis that was triggered, and it's like 14% inflation is crazy. And bear in mind, I've just reduced inflation using government measures as well, and everything is like eye-watering the price of everything. And yeah, to load back into this game and to have railroads, that's one of the great things about the Ottoman economy in this playthrough, is that it's not just that our economy's expanded. We've managed to do it by keeping and maintaining really good purchasing power, which is a key thing. You can get really rapid economic growth, but it tends to be coupled with some measure of inflation. We've had very little inflation in a 20-year period, so we've got a larger economy, and pretty much the same costs that we had in 1850, which is amazing. It's really noticeable, and it allows us to kind of keep pace. And that will change at some point, of course. That might change at some point, but anyway. So we've still got 1,800 private capital, and let's have a look at what we can upgrade then. Mines and cereal farms. I guess we go with the coal mines first. We can actually also build an additional coal mine here, so yeah, that's good. We've also got access to coal here. We have enough credits to kind of, or war score, to kind of push for a peace deal, but I don't want to use the diplomat. I kind of think, I mean, we've got nothing to lose. We can just sit back and wait for them to kind of offer it to us, I mean, we've got 100 war score. Claimed regions is going to be what? Drabeta, I guess. So we could actually press that claim now. We still have 2 war score, but why should we pay for diplomats? We could just sit back and wait for them. If they don't offer it, by the end of the year, we'll kind of request it. But Drabeta is what we want. That will recreate a kind of Moldavia up here, and that's fine. We can occupy that again later, or maybe Austria occupies it. But this is going to be really important for coal development. What do I do? What do I do? Well, I'll tell you what, let's upgrade. Let's upgrade. I mean, we want to kind of develop the bread basket. Let's upgrade the cereal farms in the Balkan Peninsula. I'm going to get our army outside of Sarajevo. in preparation for a move into Dalmatia. Osman Nuri Pasha was promoted. When they're promoted, they acquire slightly different kind of characteristics. So he's actually acquired good, able strategist, defensive engineer. So overcautious is a bit of a downside. But yeah, get a pretty good strategic value, more defensive than offensive. But this guy is going to be a sort of real prospect for the future. You know, for the sort of future conflicts of the next kind of decades. Okay, we've got the capital, we've got the manufactured goods. Let's expand, begin to expand the breadbasket. We can't do that yet. It's really expensive to actually upgrade these cereal farms for now. We're going to leave it for now. We have another officer join us as well, Woods Pasha. He's, of course, a British. He's not a British attaché. He's just a British naval officer, retired naval officer that's joined the Ottoman Navy. So that wasn't uncommon for the Ottomans, to have kind of foreign officers. I mean, I think we established that Mehmed Ali Pasha, his real name is, I can't remember what it was now, is it Karl Detroit or something like that? He's a German or a Prussian. So we've got a British naval officer, that's welcome. Having sort of foreign naval officers in our service is more than welcome. So we'll put him in the fleet reserve for the time being, and probably give him command of the main surface fleet once it comes back from operations. That's going to be it. That's all the capital we're going to spend for the time being. I have already set exports and everything, but I'm going to just tweak it slightly perhaps. We'll put sort of 30 units of manufactured goods and check out assets balance. Assets balance is good. All demands are being met. This is the area we need to keep an eye on, is chemicals and also nitrates. We've got a huge stockpile of nitrates, so there's no issue there. But very, very, very soon, demand for nitrates is going to dramatically kind of outstrip. It's going to outstrip supply very, very quickly indeed. What's our operational cost? It's actually quite high. Our operational cost for our economy is now over 1,100. We have to keep that in mind. That means that we always have to have, I'd say, 1,200 private capital in the bank at the end of each turn to cover operational costs. Right, I'm going to put you on pause. It's late August, going to pass turn. The only military move really is to kind of completing the occupation of Greece, and Greece is such a modest task. There's no real threat there, and kind of get our pieces in place for Cleopatra for the move against Egypt, which will probably come off in a month or so. So I'm going to put you on pause, past turn, and we'll see you on the other side in early September. Okay, welcome back. Early September, and our operation to secure the Peloponnese has come off without any kind of real problems. I don't think much sort of less was expected, really. Two separate engagements, and the first one is clearing the district around, I guess, Patras or Corinth. I think it's Patras is the town. Patra. Yeah, again, the force is 34,000. We inflict 10,000 casualties. Very cool unit cards these Greek forces have. But that is comfortably in the bag. One round action, followed then by an assault on the town itself. We get a national morale point for that. We'll take that in the bag comfortably, and that's the garrison force destroyed entirely. 2 round action and only 1,500 casualties and 153 horses lost, and that's pretty much a wrap for the Greek campaign. We are going to detach one army corps. We're going to check which one it's going to be. Yeah, we'll so look at his command point allotment, 12 and 12. Okay, fine. So yeah, we're going to detach one army corps, Mehmed Izet Pasha, and we're going to march him back north to Athens, a 4-day march, and we're going to really look to just hold the ground in southern Greece, and if need be, we'll detach a force to pursue these Greek brigands north. It's going to be it'll be 100. We need 100 points to take Attica or Athens. And that's probably, let's see what we're up to. So we're 10 points in, it's 90 points away. Claim the regions. Attica has 100 points. So yeah, we'll have to just really hold our position, militarily occupy the region for 6 months or so before we can secure a peace deal. Since the George I is the monarch, I think in 1870 it would have been Constantine I, appropriately named. But I mean, Greece is comfortably in a bag. As I mentioned in the last kind of turn, it's it's too much of a kind of minor power to really put up any resistance at this point. That situation did change in real life, kind of towards the turn of the century, and although the Ottomans are of course significantly weaker as well, so there was a much closer kind of parity during the time of the Balkan Wars. The Greeks were still not as powerful as the Ottomans, but combined with the kind of Bulgarian Serbs, and well, on paper the Ottomans were still stronger, but anyway, this time round there is no Marathon or Thermopylae to stop us, and yeah, just a cold embrace of the grave for Greece. Presumably they'll relocate their capital then to the Peloponnese when we secure Athens, but that's a step in the right direction. We're not going to go too crazy, we're not going to try and restore the Ottoman Empire to its kind of zenith for the sake of it, partly because it wouldn't be worthwhile doing that. We'd be occupying huge swathes of territory that aren't productive, that are rebellious, and just damage our kind of international standing. To do that would just be to invite ceaseless conflict, and as I've mentioned, I've been fond of mentioning many times, it is a game that when it goes against you, it's unrelenting and has little to offer other than sort of fairly robust and sort of sustained butt sex. So, and we don't want to be in a position where that's happening. So we want to kind of play a little bit carefully. I mean, there is a basis for securing Athens. It's not just a prestige one. There's access to nitrates in Athens, which would come in handy, not least because we're in the current process of massively expanding our chemical production, and the principal raw material required for chemicals is nitrates, and we only have one nitrate site at the moment, I believe, which is in Baghdad. One nitrates pit in Baghdad. Now there's a possibility of building a nitrates pit in Rutba, and I think also in our in Tripolitania. So we might actually get the ball rolling with the one in Tripolitania now, because why not, sort of thing. Nitrates pit, 720, 27 manufactured goods, 18 steel, and we've got comfortably got the raw materials required for that. Yes, we get the ball rolling, and we might even begin the process then of building a railroad in Tripoli, which we also theoretically have the resources for. Good stuff. So the beginning then of our first North African railroad, and we'll eventually push that. We've managed to drive Misrata up to 18 now. Road network, colonial merchants. So with the road network, that will allow us to lay railroads and then to Sirte. So we'll link up Benghazi to Tripoli, I think, and construct a railroad, which is exceeding even what the Italians did in the 20s and 30s. So yeah, good stuff. Ahmed Ayub Pasha then on his way to Sulun, 2 days away. After that, he gets to sit tight, I guess, for what, 12, 13 days? And hopefully that should be sufficient to recover his force to allow it to be ready for combat operations. And the East of Fifth Army sitting tight. Supply is stable-ish. It's a little bit tough, but it's not bad. No railroads in Sinai. We'll begin the construction of a railroad in Sinai possibly next turn. And the plan this turn, of course, is to secure Suez, or this turn of this conflict, to secure Suez and Gazala. Suez, we're hoping, will provide us with something meaningful in terms of the Suez Canal. The Suez Canal is a thing. It exists. We can see ships passing through it. It's not visible to us on the map just now, but ships are passing through it anyway. So we can pass ships through it. It's just not a construction that is visible to us. We might get some kind of benefit. I don't know. But if not, the other thing we're looking at long term is access to nitrates in Qattara, and we would need an adjoining territory, so we need to press a claim on Gazala, maybe Siwa, to give us a claim then on Qattara for next turn of the circle. So Suez and kind of Gazala is a step in the right direction that reduces the kind of the area of kind of completely autonomous Egypt down a little bit, and develops our position a little bit in Egypt, which I think is worthwhile doing. It's not necessarily worthwhile militarily occupying the whole of Egypt or pressing crazy claims on Egypt. I mean, they've got access to a huge amount of cotton. The market is awash with cotton, and it has been since 1850. That might change, but the British, they're getting lots of cotton from India. The southern states of the United States are producing cotton. Everyone's got gins, so it's not like, I mean, right now, if I look at our kind of assets balance fairly predictably, there's no way I'm going to be able to see cotton, because it's the very thing that I'm looking for. Yeah, cotton and wool. I mean, we're sitting on like 500 units of cotton, struggling to shift it. Our domestic consumption is fairly anemic. we're not exporting any. The fact that we're not exporting any, if we look again, we're the biggest exporters of cotton. And we're the biggest exporter of cotton. It's crazy. And we're shifting almost nothing. So we're shifting 5 units per turn. In fact, we're not the biggest exporter. We've got the most on offer. We've got the biggest stockpile of cotton. The biggest exporter is the United States. Russia also exports a lot of cotton, surprisingly. But yeah, it looks to be the United States. And they're selling 2 units more cotton than we are. So cotton is not where it's at just now. Doesn't mean it's not lucrative for some countries. It's just not going to be for us. And yeah, so what would be the point in occupying? That's the only thing that Egypt has to offer. Okay, Egypt is also a breadbasket, but it's not that great. It's yeah, I mean, cereal production, again, I mean, we're awash in cereals, especially with our kind of agricultural upgrades. We're shifting a lot of units of cereals. I mean, if we look at the kind of exports, I mean, wines, textiles is still good, coffee's good, it's not great. Wine, opium, you know, fruits, I mean, it's crazy units of fruits and cereals. I mean, look at the units of cereals that we're shifting per turn. 25 to Great Britain, 15 to France, an additional 19 to Britain, 22 to Austria. You know, we've got to be one of the biggest agricultural exporters. This is based on our kind of agricultural upgrades. We're cereals, so we're not. We're like, I don't know. West Ottoman 94. There's a lot of demand for agriculture, so it means that our agriculture is actually quite efficient then as well. So yeah, we are the biggest exporter of cereals just now. Next would be the Low Countries, Belgium, Holland, for some reason. But yeah, good stuff. Tobacco, fish. I mean, if we look at our kind of yield, it's crazy. 1,200 private capital revenue generated from national market sales alone. Bear in mind, we don't militarily occupy Austria anymore. You know, that is actually the size of our domestic market, plus 1,600 exports. So more than half of our private revenue now is generated through exports. Good stuff. Let's see if we can fight. It's a 6-day march. Just click on assault, and we're going to militarily occupy the Dalmatian coastline. That might have some ramifications because that is legally Austrian territory. Obviously, the Austrians can't get access to it. They don't have a navy, I gather. There's a chance the British might try and land a force there. Might be a little cheeky British move going on here. We'll keep an eye on the situation. But, I mean, 6 days for Abdelkrim to get there. That should be enough. I think the British would struggle to move a transport fleet to the central, then disembark in 6 days. I think we would be there before they are. Excuse me. Yeah, that's pretty much it for this turn. I guess now we try and conduct a kind of counter-insurgency campaign against Greece. We want to whittle these remaining Greek forces down. We now hold the terrain. The fleet is continuing to sit off Attica. Let's conduct a little naval combat patrol. Why not? Nothing is blockaded. We'll conduct a naval combat patrol up into the Dardanelles. Now this is interesting. Well, this is at half strength. We now have access. In fact, the only ships that we can build are steam-powered ships now. So even though they are still timber ships, they're all screw-powered. They still have auxiliary sails, but yeah, we're now, the technology we're at now is purely steam-powered. But that means that our merchants, we're going to begin to replace our merchants with commerce steamers, because our merchants are still, for the most part, traditional kind of age of sail. Yeah, age of sail ships. We don't need to do it just yet, but it's a consideration for the future. One thing that we are going to do this turn is we've got Somaliland in protectorate status now. The next step is going to be Eritrea, and we have the colonial penetration to move Eritrea into protectorate status. We're going to do that while we can. We've got a diplomat, we've got the state revenue to do it. The Italians are going to have to make up 5% colonial penetration in Massawa district in order to kind of scotch this move. I don't think they're going to be able to do it. Excuse me. I don't think they have time to do it. It's one diplomat, 225 money. Let's play that card, and that's going to be 8 turns. So yeah, good stuff. Now begins then securing the kind of northern part of the Horn. That brings, I mean, Somaliland. This area is already here. The next one then is Somalia, and Somalia is perhaps the more lucrative of the 3 territories that we're making a play for, because there's access to opium. In fact, the opium plantation in Mogadishu was built by us. It doesn't produce anything at the moment. It's controlled by the locals. Overall productivity is 0, transportation efficiency. So they have a major road there, but it's probably likely that the local tribe just doesn't have the kind of social organization to exploit a large kind of plantation. That doesn't mean to say that they're not getting opium from this region. It just means they're not getting it from a large capitalist kind of enterprise. Yes, Somaliland's next in the bag, really. It's going to be the next kind of play for protectorate status, and then we focus on excuse me, raising the areas enough to get them into kind of full colonial status. And we're beginning to kind of increasingly consolidate the position in the hinterland selectively. The Italians do already have a fairly prominent position here, so it's going to be a long play, really, for sort of Abyssinia proper. But we're heading in the right direction now. As for Hejaz, the Hejaz, of course, is still a protectorate and will be for the foreseeable future. We're not going to be able to move to colony status. We're still playing pacification cards to gradually lift the penetration, and that might eventually put us into the bracket necessary, but it might not. We'll see. But it might be that some kind of technology, some kind of social technology, which reflects, I don't know, like a colonial department or something like that. It might lower the threshold slightly for transition into colonial status. I don't know, but we certainly can't do any harm by raising colonial penetration in the Hejaz anyway. That's it. So military moves made. We've got railroads going in. Let's increase the size of the port, I think. Naval base extension 6818. So we'll be getting an extension of the base also in Tripoli. Depot is large enough. Yeah, we'll bring it to level 3 naval base. That's good. Okay, gonna put you on pause, pass turn, and we'll pick up on the other side then in late September. We do have, incidentally, the war score necessary to secure Drobeta. I wanted to keep that diplomat back in case we had any colonial moves, so we're not in a position to request it now, but it doesn't matter. We control it, and we control all of Romania, so it's kind of for them to offer it to us. We'll see if that happens or not, and if it doesn't, I guess by the end of the year, we'll put a request in for Drobeta, and they should give it to us theoretically. It may be that just Moldavia doesn't have any diplomats, so yeah. I'll put you on pause, pass turn, and we'll pick up on the other side then in late September. Okay, welcome back. It is late September, and let's have a little after action on Greece. And I mean, we can see from looking at the map. I was actually about to say we can see that there are no more Greek forces, but there are. They've retreated north into Epirus, so we'll pursue them north. But yeah, significant engagement at Athens. We destroyed, for the most part, the remainder of the Greek field command. So it's 6 elements of line infantry, 1 element of field artillery. That really leaves, I mean, a couple of thousand men. So we're really looking just at an insurgency now. That is kind of the nail in the coffin for kind of official Greek society anyway. What we'll probably do is detach a force, maybe even just a cavalry division or something like that. We could probably actually detach, let's a commander, because why not, if he's activated, that is. Yeah, he's not, so that's a shame. We could still keep him anyway. So we'll detach a cavalry division at a Safer Pasha and pursue the remnants of the Greek command then into Epirus. 8 days, it's fine. And we'll keep our forces in place to the south, just hold the country down and I think what we'd look to do is to construct some small forces, really just forces for occupation. So we'll begin to develop a garrison at Athens, and maybe just get some irregular forces or some light cavalry brigade or two, something like that, just to hold down southern Greece whilst we kind of deal with the remainder. We don't really want this small insurgency making a nuisance of itself, especially further north, where we have important infrastructure and coal mines and this kind of thing. So we want to really kind of deliver the coup de grace to the remainder of the force. But that is really it for the kind of Greek field command. In terms of our forces in Egypt, well, before I mention Egypt, we made another play in Europe, and that was under the mistaken belief that we would be able to seize Spalato. Turns out that isn't the case. I'm curious then as to how the Prussians took Warsaw. I'm wondering whether the Polish rebellion actually began to express like a political character, maybe became independent, and for a brief period of time there was a fledgling independent Polish state which was then absorbed by Prussia. My thinking is this might be how Prussia secured Warsaw. It's the only way I can kind of fathom it in my mind, really. Let's keep an eye on Austrian forces and their kind of displacements. They're sort of scattered around. Yeah, no major threat or concern for us at the moment. That's fine. So anyway, my thinking was if we allowed Dalmatia to become completely controlled. Now the city was controlled by brigands or Croat nationalists, presumably, but we've managed to secure the region. But legally, the city has to go back over to the Austrians. To that end, then we'll vacate, get back to Sarajevo. Excuse me. And that area will, I guess, naturally return to Austrian control. We didn't lose anything by moving in there, so whatever, you know. Greece is done, so really the next stage, and it occurs to me we don't have any diplomats, our next income of diplomats is the end of the year, so we'll probably end the video sort of on this turn. The pieces are basically in place. We've got the screening force then, which is a Croatian volunteers, with a cavalry brigade in place in Solun. Their condition is reasonable. That Ahmed Ayyub is not activated at the moment, but that's fine. We've got the 5th Army. Its supplies are holding, actually. That's good. So we can supply them. And there is a depot at the last analysis in Jerusalem. So that should be okay. 5th Army's in place. What we need to look at then is to begin to prepare for an amphibious landing. Now, the weight of the 4th Army, with all of its kind of whistles and bells, its support sort of asset units, its independent artillery regiments, and its pioneers, provosts, field hospital unit, and its supply, it's fairly heavy. I mean, it's a force, its weight is 306, and our transport fleet can carry 220. You can see at the pop-up transport capacity. So it means we're going to have to strip this force down a little bit. We'll probably subtract 1 corps and maybe half of the independent artillery, something like that, and maybe a couple of the supply detachments. It will still have enough force that it will deliver the punch necessary. But for the heavy lift purposes, we're going to have to slim it down slightly. We might have enough riverine points to move the remainder of the force kind of simultaneously, or at least just behind. In any case, we know what we have to do. That's fine. We can make 220 without gutting the force completely. We're going to kind of dock the 1st fleet now, because what we want to do, unlike the Greeks, the Egyptians do have something resembling a half-serious navy. So we want to get our navy in fairly good order, the 1st fleet, and maybe create 2 commands. We'll keep the 1st fleet as a kind of a smaller version of what it is now, and that'll provide escort from Salonika to the coast of Alexandria, and we'll create another force. Their job will be we'll create 3 forces. One will be a small force. Their job will be to sit in the trade box and conduct commerce raiding. There are Egyptian forces there, even though we can't see them when we open it for some reason. So this might just be the biggest trade players in the Med. But yeah, we can see that there are Egyptian ships. It might just be that they're combat ships, actually. Although it says Mediterranean Trade is the name of the force, but actually that's just the name of the area. So no, anyway, there's Egyptians in the trade box. We need to be mindful of that. So we want to conduct raiding in the trade box, plus we want to provide escort to Alex, plus we want to really provide a naval combat patrol on the south coast of Greece and Crete, so they don't make any landings or do anything that's problematic. I mean, if they have a large enough fleet, they would be able to theoretically blockade a large port, which could be could cause trade problems for us and supply problems. So we want to conduct a kind of naval combat patrol also. Protectorate played, that's good. That'll take 7 turns, and then Eritrea will be a protectorate of the Ottoman Empire. Next up is going to be Somalia. It's going to be harder because the Italians are pushing hard for colonial penetration in Mogadishu. We need a really convincing lead here. We don't have much. The next thing that we have really is going to be, we don't have any because they're both being played. But once these these military expedition pacify cards are played out, we'll begin to play one of them continuously in Mogadishu, because that's the only card that we have left that can lift us above 35, which is a problem we've had ongoing, really. So we can actually, that caps out at 50% colonial penetration. So we'll be playing that card on Mogadishu repeatedly until we have a convincing enough lead, because we already outlaid the necessary state revenue and the diplomats to bring Somalia into protectorate status. It just didn't fire because we didn't have a convincing enough lead. The Italians had managed to get a couple of penetration points, and that sunk our case on the international stage. So we ended up kind of throwing money away to grease the wheels for nothing, really. Bit of a foul up on our part. I kind of underestimated the Italians there, but the Italians are eager to establish themselves as a colonial power in some form. We're keeping an eye on so what is it? Penetration is 42. We're at 30. The French are at 35. We're trying to maintain a halfway house in Tunisia, because Tunis will be both an Italian and a French objective. It isn't actually an objective for us. That doesn't mean to say that it wouldn't be, worthwhile having, but securing Tunisia will make an enemy of the French, I would suggest. We will be then looking at, periodical wars in North Africa. At some point that will happen whilst we're fighting the Austrians and the Russians. And, the French might not necessarily stop at Gabes. They might sort of fancy pushing it a little further. They might fancy making a play for sort of Libya or something like that. So anyway, worth keeping that in mind. Maintaining this is good. It keeps them from having a casus belli on us, because if they control Tunisia, if they get a protectorate status, this area will gradually automatically go over to French military control. Once that happens, they have an adjacent region to us, they get a claim on Tripoli, and that gives them a permanent casus belli against us. So it's sort of better to make sure that this is nobody's, really. And yeah, I mean, there's different kinds of military control as forces are landed and re-embarked, but this is a kind of no man's land politically. It's theoretically still under the government of the Beylik, I guess, the sort of the Tunisian Bey, who is autonomous, an autonomous early modern Ottoman governor. So anyway, that's it. That's pretty much it. I'm absolutely mind-bendingly good round economically. So lots of units of coffee. Big drop off for opium, 21 units of opium. Bear in mind that we're selling opium at quantity, and this is a high yield commodity. I mean, selling 21 units, 10 years ago we were selling 21 units of what? It's 30 units, it's 33 units. This is the kind of quantity that we were selling cereals at 10 years ago. We're now selling opium, which is like a high yield kind of commodity. Luxury goods shifting, which is good to see. Big drop off for cereals, so we're still exporting units to France. It's more than 50 units of tobacco, 60 units of tobacco. It's sensational. Still depend on imports of timber from Japan. It's really quick to check that. So even with 30 units imported per turn, we're not quite making it. We need another 2 or 3 units. We want to kind of try and keep what we have. We're strategically, we'll put it to 5 actually, because that means we've got a slight income. We're strategically importing from Japan, of course, because we want to be patrons of Japanese economic development. A powerful, robust Japan on the sort of the east coast of the Russian Empire is advantageous for us. So we want to be patrons of the Japanese economy and help them develop. We're strategically importing from places now where it benefits us in terms of geopolitics. But yeah, let's have a look at the still importing gold. That's good for conversion, and we're importing 20 units of chemicals per turn. But that'll begin to change gradually. We've had one chemical plant has opened in the last fortnight. I think we've got another 3 or 4 in construction. Plus, we'll probably open up another 1 or 2. We'll begin the construction of another 1 or 2. I'm thinking, let's stick one in Sarajevo. Sarajevo is large enough now, and maybe one in Basra as well, or Mosul, or something like that. We might not. Sarajevo might be pointless because it's an area that's going to be besieged periodically, isn't it? So maybe that's not the smartest idea. Anyway, it's one plant, maybe Baghdad or Damascus or something, or even Tripoli. Actually, why not? But I mean, just check the figures here. Crazy. 1,400 national market sales. 1,400. 2,000 exports. That's extraordinary stuff. Like in terms of exports, we weren't even exporting all of the cereals that we could. It wasn't even the best round for exports. I think I've zeroed everything out now because I've set exports for the next round. But just sensational. The economy's absolutely kind of booming. That's going to be it, I think. We're in late September. What I'll probably do is to push through now. We've got the military occupation of Greece down. Unless something dramatically changes, we get a declaration of war from an interested party. The plan in the short term is to deal with this insurgency. This is a very small force. I can't foresee this being a problem. I mean, it's basically, I think, one regiment. I mean, our intelligence suggests it's one supply and one artillery detachment. I suspect there's probably also a line infantry regiment, another strength 1 or 2 in the mix there, but a cavalry division should have the speed, should be able to run that force down. That said, this cavalry division is not activated. I'm actually thinking, you know what, let's not give it a leader, because that way we can turn it to an offensive posture and be sure it engages. It's slightly faster as well, because having a leader that is not activated, of course, gives it a kind of a malice. So 7 days, this cavalry division should run down the rest of that Greek force. And yeah, I'll leave it here. Late September, we'll pick up probably at the turn of the year. We've got the forces, the pieces in place for a move against Egypt. Greece is going to be a case of sitting tight for 6 months to a year. And if by the new year Romania hasn't offered us a peace, we'll use the other diplomat, because we're only going to have 2 diplomats. We'll use the other diplomat to press a claim for Drobeta. So one diplomat will be sent for the claim at Drobeta, the other will be sent to declare war on Egypt. And then it'll be 6 months before we get further diplomats. So we might even declare war on Egypt in the spring, sort of thing. But yeah, thanks for being patient whilst I've sort of been ill. I gather it's been probably a couple of weeks since the last video. And well, thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.